Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, a window into the soul of the North Fork of Long Island. We'll delve into the pulse of our community, its pressing issues, promising opportunities, and the rich stories that weave our shared history. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 114, we sit down with Carmen Campos, educator, puppeteer, and lifelong advocate for language learning. Carmen shares her story of growing up on Long Island, how she first found her calling as a teacher, and the journey that led her through decades of classroom experience and leadership roles in language education. Carmen continues to inspire learners of all ages through her work in puppetry, an art form she discovered as a powerful tool for engaging students and bringing language to life. She walks us through her creative process, from imagining stories and lessons to designing and building each puppet with care and intention. We talk about what she learned from her years in public and independent schools, how her administrative roles shaped her understanding of language instruction, and what she sees as the most pressing challenges in education today. And as always, we end with a look towards the future of storytelling, of language, and of the North Fork community she calls home. So I hope you enjoy episode 114 with Carmen Campos. This episode was recorded March 19th, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's really nice to have you on today.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I can't say enough about what you're doing and how helpful that is for someone coming into the community and getting to know all of their neighbors. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. And so with the podcast, I usually like to start off with a question. If you can provide us with a little background about yourself.
Sure. Well, my family is from Ecuador, and I had older siblings that were born there, and I was born here on the South Shore of Long Island, West Islip. And having grown up like that, my parents spoke Spanish at home. My father pretty much spoke English to us. We all responded in English, but my mom spoke Spanish to us so that we would be bilingual. I come from a house of 5, but I always say 5 plus 2 because we always had a relative visiting us from Ecuador. So I grew up in a bilingual home in a very relative homogeneous community of non-Hispanics. So I think I was the only Latino family in West Islip, or, yeah. And so that definitely had a huge influence on me.
And how was it, like the overall experience growing up in that neighborhood? And
I mean, I had one of the best educations. I think, having grown up in the late 60s, early 70s, graduating, I was very, very blessed to go to the schools, and I had great time. But there was a certain duality in the way I lived. At home, we ate foods that I did not see anywhere in the supermarkets or anything. My parents went to special places to get these things. So it was like plantains and rice, beans, all of those things that my friends had no idea what it was. And I didn't share that. So home was very private. And in school, it was just, the pizza, lots of Italian food around. And so probably never invited anybody over for dinner. So there was just this difference. I looked different than my friends. My name Carmen was different. My siblings were Francisco, Raul, Pilar, Ricardo. Some of them got shortened into like Rick and Frank, but not Carmen. And so you kind of lived it And you did hear certain things that as a child I didn't even know how to respond. But I was fortunate overall. But I definitely saw that there was a difference.
Yes. And well, in terms of your schooling experience and going through high school, more so with the educational part, were you interested in any specific subject matter or core classes?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious that I had a edge on the Spanish part of it. So I did take Spanish in 7th grade, but then skipped it in 8th, took French because were encouraged to take a language. And then by 9th grade, I was taking French and Spanish. And then I eventually kept those up because it just were easy. They were easy. I was really good at it. I was, accelerated classes in that. But I think education is what I really liked. And so I thought for a long time to be a teacher. I initially thought elementary ed. Also having the experience of always having a relative visit us that did not speak English proved to be fun because we got to teach them, and then funny because we got to teach them weird words that weren't always the best. But it was a natural thing. There was someone that was always coming. You were always teaching, and here I am teaching at a very young age. And sometimes we shared, my mom taught us Spanish dances and Spanish songs. We would go Christmas caroling and speak and sing in Spanish. And my mom took us around, and we just sort of, to collect for some needy project or something. And we thought it was a great thing, but still very different. And in regular school, I still played sports. I went to all the parties. I did have restrictions. My parents did not know a lot of the people, so wasn't allowed to sleep over a friend's house, had to be home at an extremely early time than my friends. And there was a lot of boys can do this, girls can't do that my friends didn't seem to have. Sports were not like the biggest thing for my parents, that I played a sport or something. So there was just things that now I reflect and I go, okay, even going to school, my brothers went away. I had a choice. It was Dowling College or Dowling College. And Dowling was a great school, but it was because it was home. You weren't going away.
Brothers had the option.
Yeah, they went to Oneonta, they went to Pratt, they became architects, other things. And my sister and myself were Dowling, which had a great educational department, so it was fine. Yes. But, I mean, just the choice was not even to be thought of.
And also, was there a particular instance that first inspired you to become an educator?
I think it was really having great teachers.
Great teachers.
I remember, and it's funny because when you retire, you have time to, meet up with your old high school friends, and I have been meeting up with them on a regular basis, and we are all always saying how blessed we were to have such great teachers. Thank God. I mean, I think that everyone can pretty much say they had a great teacher in their lives, and maybe some not so great, but I remember the great ones, and the great ones were the ones that did a lesson that was not necessarily about their subject matter. And I think that's always been my cause. In my eyes, it doesn't matter what you teach. It's what you're teaching. It's that bigger lesson. It's how to use your brain. It's being kind. It's creating a community. It's all of those other things. It's not the grammar. It's not just what your lesson is. So that part I loved.
Yes. And with your time at Dowling, was it in education?
It was originally elementary ed. In fact, I graduated with an elementary ed certification, and that's what I had hoped to go into. I still was taking languages. Even at Dowling, I took Italian, I took French, I took Spanish, thinking this would all be a nice little extra for when I teach elementary. I also love traveling because my parents did take us to South America. And so to me, this seemed like the most logical thing. Of course, you have to speak Italian if you go to Italy, or speak French if you go to France. You should know languages. That was something that my parents kind of showed us. But I was originally I wanted to be elementary ed. That was it. There just happened to not be any jobs. It was that glut of everybody wanted to be an English teacher or elementary ed. And so I was subbing, and as I subbed, I was offered a job as a Spanish teacher in my old alma mater, West Islip.
Wow.
I do think that the presumption was she must have gone for Spanish certification. She must be a Spanish teacher. And when I told them, like, I don't have all of my credits, they were like, get him. And I literally got him over the summer and had a job in the fall. So I fell into it.
But you didn't really envision yourself teaching Spanish?
Never. People used to ask me, like, oh, you're taking French? Are you going to be a language teacher? And I used to go, never. Partially, I think, in the true sense, language was taught, as some might remember my age area, it was ALM. It was the way they taught the Army, another language. It was very mechanical. You memorized conversations. So there are people probably 50 and up that can still remember exact dialogues, but it wasn't conversational. You didn't really learn a language. So that thought of that type of teaching was just, ugh. When I did go for my certification, a new thing came about, and that new thing was conversational. It was getting people to talk, and that was right up my alley. So it just so happened that I came in at the right time.
And around what year was...
Oh, I have no idea. Probably in early 80s, I would say.
Okay.
So the conversational part of it had me be my elementary person, because an elementary school teacher has kids act out and play. And so I got to do that. And hence, puppets came into my life with that as well. So it's get someone to talk. Let's act it out. Let's pretend.
Yes. And was there a time, because you were teaching, but then did you go back to school later on?
Yeah, I continued going to school because even at West Islip, we had tax pack come in, and I was out of job. I luckily got a scholarship for English as a second language. So I went back, got that certification, worked in Bayshore for a couple of years. English as a second language is one of those, I'm back at home again, because I would have kids from all over learning English. This was like me growing up. I was back to teaching English again. And again, it was, I taught elementary to high school, and it was fun. But I eventually got a better position, and I ended up going to teach Spanish in Babylon. That's when the puppetry really came to life, because I had kids, putting on productions with puppets speaking Spanish or English or whatever, different languages. And I got to be a little bit more creative, because I taught all different levels in Babylon. I left Babylon when I started to get the itch to be an administrator. I wanted to see changes, and this was a way of doing it. So I got my administrative degree at CW Post, and I got a job, like literally they're handing it to me, and I got the job in West Islip as a director of world languages and ESL. And it was fantastic. It was, back to my alma mater once again, kind of reflecting my whole go around of saying, oh my God, this is where I went to school, this is where I taught, and now I'm in charge, which was wonderful. I had a fantastic group of fellow administrators, teachers, 6 elementary schools and 2 middle schools, and so many different languages. I got to introduce sign language into the school. So there was a lot of great things going. But I think I found like a little bit more of an itch, and that itch was leading me to going for my doctorate. As an administrator, I saw a lot of people spending money on technology and teachers not either, one, wanting it, or two, using it, or even administrators knowing what to do with it, just knowing it's a good thing. So I wanted to do my dissertation, my doctorate on that. I went to St. John's, and in the interim, I ended up going to Colts. I think in West Islip, I was also kind of missing teaching because I was a straight administrator. So I ended up going to Cold Spring Harbor, became a director there, and I got to teach 3 classes. And I became president of it was an organization on Long Island, Foreign Language Administrators Association of Chair People and Supervisors. It's an organization of throughout Long Island. Everyone has a chair of a language. They would come to our meetings. We would talk about bigger problems or how to solve them or whatever it was. And while I was being the president there, New York State eliminated all language exams, the Regents exams. And in eliminating the Regents exams, left us with a big what? So people were scrambling. And as president, I felt it was a call to action. And what we ended up doing was organizing a little bit more into committees. And one of the reasons why New York State was eliminating was because of money. No news. I mean, that's still going on, right?
Yes.
But I wanted to show them that this has a huge downfall. And one of the biggest downfalls was literally within the month of them announcing this, schools throughout New York State were eliminating their programs in language. Because first of all, it's a trickling effect. So it's not a mandate. Exams, I mean, even when you hit it in your head, I mean, you could just look out the hall and you see kids going, woohoo, no more Regents exams in Spanish or French or whatever. So as soon as you take off the importance of an exam, you're saying something. It's not that important. I'm not a big fan of exams, personally or professionally. I don't like the end of the year type of exams. Lots of pressure on kids.
Yes.
And we can go on with that. But having said that, when you say, well, social studies has an exam or history has an exam and this one has an exam, but language doesn't, you are saying it's not as important. So I created a website and we organized as a group and we started to do some training. We went throughout New York State on our own money on the weekends, and we trained schools on how to create their own questions for an exam. And we had an exam consortium where we started to create exams digitally. So they submitted questions, we organized them. So an exam made by teachers throughout New York State, we had to create 5 different exams, actually 10, because there were 2 different levels. So Spanish, French, German, Italian, Mandarin. And at a Regents level, and we call that checkpoint B, and one at checkpoint A, which was like for the 8th graders, a proficiency level. We did all of this. We had school districts join our consortium. It's a minimal fee of like $25, something really very minimal, might have been more. And in return, they could submit questions, but if they didn't, fine. We would hand them the exam very close to the exam date. We try to keep the format still, similar to the Regents and the proficiency. And, we did our best with digitally sending them out, very secure, trusting schools. And we kept it going. It was we called it the Flax exam. That was more than 10 years ago. And I could say that the Flax exams still exist. We are still creating them. some people can use past ones. There's still people that have to buy, into the Flax group, and this way they could collect the exams or get additional training, professional development, all of that. In that time, I did go and meet with New York State Ed, and we discussed what they could do to make it cheaper because it didn't cost us anything. We never paid the teachers anything to write questions. We were handing out the exams digitally. Didn't cost us anything to do that as well. The only thing that was costing us was our trips and training and the website. So that was like the beginning of, for me, the idea of how politics is in education. And that's what I wrote my dissertation on. And it's, there's always been politics in education and in language in particular. Language has always been affected by politics, from our forefathers coming to this country, and Pennsylvania mostly being German speakers, and Louisiana being French speakers, and how we started to come to English as our speaking language. But with the idea that we really never needed an official English language throughout the country. Never. We've never had it. And yet politics have recently called for it.
Yes.
So I would say that there is something to be said about how even what we learn in school is so political. So that kind of left me a little,
Yeah.
I didn't like to think of the politics in all of it, because with politics comes the money.
Yes.
And it should be about what I thought teaching is about, creating a citizen of the world.
Yes. And I think the rest of the world might look at America more making fun of us in terms of just, oh, do you speak any other languages? And usually
No.
the answer is no.
Right.
And I think that's changing a bit now. I don't know if more Americans, I think, do have a second language that they're...
You're very optimistic. I don't think I don't. I would say that you might be thinking along the lines of your experience, but I would say overall, if you look at the whole country,
yes,
it's extremely limited.
Okay.
And I just came back from Paris, where you just hear the Americans always, the ones that insist on English. And I traveled to Mexico 2 months ago. And I can tell you that it is the Americans that you hear speaking in English. It's this idea that a certain entitlement of, you are trying to sell us something, so I guess you will speak English. Whereas that isn't the case when people come here. They don't naturally assume that you will speak French or Italian, maybe Spanish in New York, maybe. In the city, it's definitely a lot more diverse, and you hear many more different languages. But I don't know if Long Island is there, and I certainly don't think that the country is there yet.
Yes. Just to go back a bit, in terms of your early days as a teacher, were there any specific memories that kind of stood out to you when you first started teaching?
I have a terrible story. I have a story about when I first started teaching. I, like all other kids who ever wanted to be a teacher, you come home with your stack of papers and your red pen that had like red on one side and black on the other. And I remember stopping off at my mom's house, and I was correcting papers as she was talking to me. And my father came over and he said, he looked at some of the papers and he said, "You're marking this wrong." And it was, "Oh, well, Dad, they did this wrong, whatever." And he said, what's your goal?" And I think he wasn't talking about the goal for that lesson. He was talking about, what's my goal in teaching? I said, well, prepare them for the future. With my red pen in hand and my stack of papers. And he said, well, what is the future? And I didn't have an answer. And he said, if you're going to shine the light for them to follow you, you need to know where you're going. You have to have that light. And from feeling like, oh, I'm this great teacher, I felt like a little tiny mouse going, I've got a lot to learn. And it's okay. Because I see new teachers come in and they are full of enthusiasm. But no matter if you've been teaching 30, 40 years or your first couple of months, you have a lot to learn. There is no master class. You might have a almost perfect lesson, but then there's tomorrow. It's another lesson. And every year, different kids with different problems. So we have a never-changing world.
Yes. And also, I think over your experience teaching, you've taught in both public schools and independent schools. How do those experiences differ, and what do you take away from them?
Yeah, I have been very, very fortunate. I started with public schools and some that had some resources, money-wise, and others that had a lot more. And I saw differences in just that. I mean, people used to say like, oh, you're on the North Shore schools. Well, the North Shore schools, yeah, you get a different clientele. You are given more money as a profession. You have a better retirement plan. These are all real facts. Most teachers just go for the job because they love teaching. They don't always look at the contract. And I have gone around to different schools, so I do see the differences. And I see what our taxes, unfortunately, how that's done is your tax money goes directly to the school. There's a correlation between your taxes and the school, and so therefore there's a correlation between wealth and a wealthy school and what you get. And I've gotten to experience all that, but when I left my I was working as an administrator. I was offered a job via a friend who was working at the Dalton School. It's an independent, Upper East Side, very affluent school, extremely high, great reputation. I can't say enough about the school. But she said, I was getting close to like retirement age for public schools. And I thought, well, maybe, but that's like a commute to the city, and I would be teaching 5 classes, kind of exciting me, so I was like a change. So I went and saw the school and saw if it was a fit, both for, if I was a fit for them and if they were a fit for me. And I was lucky enough to get that job. And I went back in the classroom, and that school was able to offer things that every school should be able to offer. Our lunches were organic. I never had to prepare. I would have salmon for lunch on a regular day. Kids would eat the same thing. So there was no bunch of French fries and processed foods and little lunches from home that, that harried moms would have to prepare, or harried teachers in that case as well.
Yes.
There were fruits. We would have like a guest chef come like from television. We would have meetings where there was wine served and just really good food where you would want to go to that meeting after school. And you got to really talk to your colleagues and collaborate with them and talk about the bigger pictures. We'd have guest speakers come that just finished writing books. And the end, which changed my life, they would give us a certain amount of professional development money that we would use to do what we wanted to, as long as it related to school somehow. And I took that money, and every year, minimally once, maybe more than once, I would go to another country and I would work with a puppeteer in another country and learn about carving in Prague or creating puppets in Costa Rica, Guatemala. Went to conferences that were international, presented in Italy, in Spain, and you were really given this is the same teacher that taught in West Islip. So I have to go back and say, yes, this school had a tremendous to give to, and I was offered I got a Fulbright scholarship. And I spent some time in Peru, where it was just an amazing experience. But I would say that the same teacher that you could find here on the North Fork, that same person works just as hard, maybe even harder, than the most elite teacher of whatever school.
Yes.
A good teacher just puts in the work.
Even if they might have more limited resources.
I know almost so many of my teacher friends that they just pay for everything themselves. I mean, even when I was at Dalton, I paid for things myself. You cannot help yourself if you just want it. You know that that's what's going to help. I've been to some of the schools here, and they're the same. Teachers are always digging into their own pocket to put something there that they know will help with understanding or child's care or whatever. So we're all the same. Unfortunately, we all don't have the same pockets. And that's a shame. It shouldn't be like that.
That's kind of the main differences. Well, one of the main differences within that schooling system.
Right. And but beyond private and public, just go public to public and you'll see huge differences, opportunities for children to thrive. Classroom size, what they're being offered. Your school has a tennis court or a pool or trips to go overseas. At Dalton there was several trips, and starting pretty young, and even the language courses that were being offered. But robotics is big everywhere, but not every school has that kind of money to put into that.
Yes. No, definitely. Yeah. That's a problem.
And then you go from, let's say, New York State to other states, you see that there's even a greater difference. So the inequality when it comes to education is great. And so I'm all for leveling the playing ground, the playing field.
Yes. And like you mentioned, when you started to get into more of the administration or leadership role, or as director of the world languages and ESL, but you think your main takeaway from that experience with language education was how much, you said, with politics being influenced within that part of the education?
Yes. I think it's still being influenced. So much of it goes with money. So much of it goes with, even a certain prejudice. It's also resources. We have a certain assessment at some of the more elite schools that really do measure how much language you know for your own sake, not for a grade or for an AP score or something like that. Right now we're in such a we have a problem with just inflated grades everywhere, because then it goes into the whole college and university, and where do you go from there? And a mix of technology. I mean, look what we can do with AI and tech translations, but translations. That's why I'm back to my class. My class was not about how do you get one language translated to another. It was the cultural understanding that brings you. That's the education. That was the light that my father was talking about. What's my goal? My goal isn't to get them to speak Spanish. My goal was for them to understand that the world out there, having them think, translating ideas, telling stories. Where are we the same? Where are we different? So storytelling is a huge part of education, and it has always been a huge part of education.
Yes. And obviously we've touched on it a bit, but what do you think are the biggest challenges in language education today, and how have you specifically worked to overcome some of them?
Well, I mean, some of the greater problems is actually getting good teachers, first of all. Getting any good teacher, whether it's language or anything, we have a shortage in getting really good education classes and getting those teachers to be interested in teaching. There's a high percentage of teachers that teach 1 year and leave the profession. And then there's another group that we don't want. I got my degree, and after 2 years, you're like, oh my God, get this teacher out of here. And I have, as an administrator, made sure that the people that weren't really good left. It's in a public school, it's extremely costly. So it's very hard to do. So that is a huge problem. Now, when they eliminated the regions going back, we eliminated programs. So now you can't go to just any school and get your language degree. So that made it harder. So now we don't have as many Italian teachers. Even out here, there aren't a lot of Spanish teachers. And then you would think, well, there's a Latino community. But not every American wants to teach English. Not every Latino wants to teach Spanish. And let's not even mention, Mandarin or German or Latin or whatever, any other. So getting good professional teachers, that is probably one of our biggest challenges in every area. Math, science, every area. Still having many, many friends that are administrators, that is their crisis. When they do hire, then they cross their fingers. Will this work?
Yes.
That's a problem.
And do you think it's what's being taught or what languages people are focusing on? Mostly, I think in the past, was it more Spanish, French, and maybe Italian or German or Mandarin? Is that changing today with the United States?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's more obvious than when I first started teaching. It's more obvious to take Spanish because, they see it used in so many ways in their business. It's an asset. I believe policemen could take a Spanish test. They even get more money. This is an incentive. French, maybe not so much. But, that there's certain careers that having a Latin base is good for you. I still think that that's really important. I know German programs have not done well anymore that they used to be. Italian kind of is sporadic. It's really just more through heritage, people that want to maintain that. Otherwise, it's not the calling for school districts. So it's more Spanish than ever before. And yes, now there is more less commonly taught languages. So those less commonly taught languages are very inviting, but very difficult to get certified teachers, which is what you need in a public school. So we can have a Mandarin speaker, and in the private schools, we could hire her if she's not certified. But in the public schools, we can't. And we have now with our immigration policies changing, we're going to have more of a problem finding teachers to teach upper levels or conversational classes that are native born or near native. So all of those things influence language learning, which I think in many cases technology is our only other answer. So there are more and more companies that are developing language learning apps or whatever. They're still limited, but AI might just give us the perfect partner to speak to.
Have you seen that being developed more?
Oh yeah,
in recent years.
At one time that was my thing, was just technology. I delved into virtual field trips with students. I took students on real field trips, but found that what I was trying to point out wasn't necessarily what they were looking at. So we all develop our interests at our own level. So if I'm looking at the Eiffel Tower because I'm in Paris and you're staring at the croissant across the room, chances are me pointing out the Eiffel Tower is just going to be like, okay, she's talking, and now you go right back to that croissant and you want to taste it, and you have a question about it. How much is that? What's different about that croissant than the croissant in New York? And so if you offer students a virtual field trip where you can say, look around, what do you see? Now you might be more willing to tell me what you see and not what I want you to see. And so we're exploring together. So that virtuality of a possible trip like that, I think has a lot of possibilities. Still needs direction from a teacher. But there's a lot to be said. Now, if you had a virtual tour guide who spoke only Spanish to you, then again, you would have to interact.
Yes.
So I think there's some, I leave everything open.
Yes.
As long as it brings some humanity to the forefront, I'm all for it.
Yes. And if there are going to be limitations in the future, we have to look for alternatives.
Exactly.
But I was also curious because I don't know if you could tell with recent immigrants today, or because when I think of more from like the immigration in the 1920s or early 1900s, I think there was their native language they would speak in their home, but I think there was a little bit of, for that generation, they told their children, don't speak the language, or I know because my ancestry, with Italian, they would say, oh, don't speak Italian, just learn English and speak that at home. So they ended up, because I don't speak, well, I know a tiny bit, but it wasn't passed on. But I think that's changed a bit with more recent immigration today, where they still teach their children what their parents came over knowing.
Right. I do think that there was that try to integrate completely into the American culture, which is English, and that got you the job. That would keep you without an accent. You know, they were doing it so that you would prosper. Unfortunately, a little bit of your identity was missing, except for probably food. That is the identity keeper. So the recipes that my mom would still make, that I still make, that I do, that brings me home. And Italians definitely kept that. And pretty much every immigrant group kept their food. Yes. Even if it was at home, eventually it would market out into restaurants and what have you. But I do think there's a sense of pride now that we kind of bring out a little bit more. I sometimes think it's not just about Columbus Day and St. Patrick's Day. What about the Latinos? What about the Chinese? We have so many that, can you celebrate them all? How about we just celebrate them all every day?
Yes, definitely. And then also to get back to, you mentioned puppetry. When did you first realize that puppetry could be a powerful tool for teaching Spanish?
Well, I used puppets when I was initially doing elementary ed. I used puppets when I would work in small groups, reading a story. I used it in ESL, reading stories, telling stories. It was more of my character. I would purchase puppets when I saw them in stores, and then eventually online. And then I got to a point where I couldn't find the puppets I needed, and they were too expensive. So I started making my own puppets. Hence, in a language class, you want your kids to speak. And we come from a way of teaching that kind of rewards all of the big voices, the extroverts in the classroom. And our world is not made up of extroverts, or 100% extroverts, let's say. There are people that are very quiet and excellent language speakers. They just are quiet. That's their personality. I don't want to change that. Some of those same people are great puppeteers, because it's not them that are talking, it's the puppet. So I started by making sock puppets for every kid in my class. And I would have them create a character, or I would give them a character. They would name them Pedro or Maria. Now, it couldn't be John, because that's your name. It was, one. And Juan comes from where? It can't be New York. No, it's Mexico. Okay, so Juan now already is not you. And I remember very distinctly getting a big bang for my buck because all I just wanted them to do was speak. So I would say, ¿Cuál es tu color favorito? What's your favorite color? And the student would look at me and say, me gusta el azul. I like blue. And I would go, great. And I'd try to go on to the next kid. And the same student would say, he would hold up his puppet and he would say, a mí me gusta el rojo. And I like red. And I remember taking a double take at that kid saying, oh my God, he gave me an answer and he gave the puppet to give an answer. So I got 2 answers from one student. But it was his way of like, this is the personality that my puppet has. And when I would call kids up to volunteer, to act out anything, or to just have a conversation, impromptu, with puppets, they would speak. And sometimes it was the quiet kid that would speak through the puppet. Very funny. Him, not so much. And it's always a big surprise. But the kids would also, I would always make a point of saying, your puppet has to open its mouth in order to speak. And I brought my puppet along. I brought one of my puppets. He's my Señor Zorro. He's a fox. And when I have him open his mouth, he has to go, ah. And when he opens up his mouth, he is enunciating something a little bit more clearly. So instead of telling a student, no, speak like this, I could tell them through puppets. Instead of embarrassing somebody or making them feel shy or by saying, I couldn't hear you, I would say, your puppet needs to project. Hola! And he would project in a funny way. Now, the big trick to this is I can't be embarrassed. I can't have students kind of play in front of me when I'm not ready to play. So it doesn't matter how old I've been, because I've been all ages when I've worked with puppets. And I've always kind of just said, okay, I'm going to be silly. And I have to pretend with my puppet. My puppet is usually, I teach a class, I'll have the puppet on for a while. The puppet is always the bad guy. I am always the good guy. So if I'm checking homework and I go, Chris, ¿tienes tu tarea? Do you have your homework? And you would say, you would pretend you're looking for it. And then you would say, I have it here somewhere. And then just so I don't stand there, I would continue and I'd maybe come back to you. But my puppet would give you away. So I would have a puppet on my hand saying, he didn't do it. I'm going, no, don't be silly. Of course he did it. Chris is a good student. And so I could go back and forth. And then the class would laugh and you would laugh. But the message was out there. I don't think you really did it.
Yeah.
But without giving you a 0, without embarrassing you, kind of laughing with you, realizing that tomorrow you better have it because you don't want the puppet to tell you again you didn't do it.
Yes.
So the puppet was always my bad guy. If somebody was talking in class, I would ignore it, but the puppet would get up and say, I can't hear you. They're talking in the back. I'm like, oh, they're not really talking. They're whispering. I'm like, no, I can hear. So the puppet gave me that I could be a little bit strict with the puppet. Sometimes kids don't want to work in groups or pairs, which is something language teachers love to do. And I've had students where they say, can I just work with a puppet? And I'm like, okay, I want to see how that looks. And they go off at a desk and do a pretend conversation where they're both parts. Because they don't, this is mostly middle school, they don't want to work with their partner. They're not feeling up to it. Maybe they're mad at their friends. Whatever it is, it's giving them another way of doing something. So it's also a way of telling stories. During the pandemic, we were remote teaching. And since I have my computer, I created suitcase theaters.
Yes.
And the suitcase theater had a story of Frida Kahlo. And so the kids got to see a full view of the theater. And I got to, with my little Frida puppet, tell them the story of Frida when she was, in fact, when she was 6 years old, she was in bed, really couldn't see anybody. She had polio. And so she made up an imaginary friend. And I told them, imagine being 6 years old in bed for 6 months and you create a character because there's no online anything. There's no friends coming to visit you. Your parents are working like crazy, so they can't even spend that. And you're in pain. So here we were in a pandemic and they were restricted, but then they realized they weren't that restricted.
Yes.
And they were able to empathize with a 6-year-old Frida Kahlo. And then how later she used that experience to create one of her most famous paintings. It was Las Dos Fridas, the two Fridas, that showed that other side, that duality. So, I mean, puppetry can tell so many stories. I love stories that have to do with animals. Jane Goodall is one of my absolute heroes. Because as you get older, you have less heroes, because like, hey, yeah, and there's a lot of young people that do wonderful things. And I go, let's see how they do later. It's like you start to become like really, really, Jane Goodall's going to be 91 years old. And she tells great stories. And she's had a wonderful life. But the best story is really the one she tells now, which at 91, she still travels every day of the year except for 30 days out of the year. And she gives the story of hope. And hope is really a very encouraging thing at any age. So, but the stories have to do with, nature and animals. And so I like to feel that she is my inspiration.
Yes. And also I was curious, were you introduced to puppets early on in your childhood?
I mean, I guess through the like Soupy Sales or some of the other ones. When my children were very, when they were babies, it was, Sesame Street and Muppets. I loved the Muppets. But the interesting thing about Sesame Street is that it was really an educational show with, of course, entertainment, but it was educational. And I've often said, what happened to that education? Once they go into school, it's like, okay, that was good for home, but it's not good for school? Of course it's good for school. So why aren't they bringing puppets into school to continue that? And so often people associate puppetry with children, very young children. But I've been to many an adult puppet show. I've been to places with my friends where we pull out the puppets, and it's still a lot of fun. It still brings a smile to people's faces. I had an experience when I was on my Fulbright in Peru. It was supposed to be on technology, on 360 videos, technology. And I did bring a llama puppet or two, as one would do. And I found that people wanted to, the group of people that I was with, they wanted to take pictures of the indigenous people. They wanted to learn about their lives. But imagine being in a remote village in Peru and you're an indigenous person and you see this American taking pictures of you. Well, first, it's a taboo when you take pictures of the children. They don't want, they feel like you're stealing the spirit of the child, and you should be respectful. But if I had that little llama puppet in my hand, people came to me. The children came to me. The mothers came to me. People were willing to talk to me. I got to know people just with that puppet. And I came back from the Fulbright experience realizing that between the technology and the puppetry, I'll go with the puppetry. It was much more humanistic. It was not intrusive. It was respectful. And it also brings you into, you're not looking at a culture, you're with that culture, you're a part of it. I mean, people wanted to hold them, pet them, it was great.
Yes.
And that was a huge lesson for me over the technology, where you're taking pictures of people like the way people do now.
Yeah, and there's no interaction.
There's no interaction. There's no giving of you. There's just taking.
Yes. And also, I was going to ask, you mentioned you create puppets too, and you mentioned Prague, going there for, but what's the process like when you create new puppets?
Oh, that's such a great question. I have several ways of doing something like that. I went to Prague because I heard of a sculptor there that does several marionettes a week, and Prague is like the capital of marionettes. It's just really wonderful. But I told him I wanted to create a storyteller, a young woman, because I don't know. I thought that was like, more like Disney. And as I started to carve, I realized carving a smooth surface when you haven't carved before is very difficult. So immediately she got wrinkles. And this great puppeteer who I often think of him because he said, Carmen, you're better off creating an old woman because an old woman has more stories to tell. And I thought, oh my God, yes. So I created an old Andean woman and I gave her a backstory. Her name is Esperanza and she is from Peru and she's very old. And I dressed her in Peruvian garb and I told my class that we were going to have a guest speaker, but we would have to prepare questions. And she's very old. And I did not tell them it was a puppet. And so they worked in groups and they created a whole list of questions. I said, if somebody asks your question, do not repeat that question. Ask another one. So the kids were all waiting and I kept on saying, she should be coming, but she's very old and she's very slow. And she loves to tell stories and she has many kids. That's all I told. I told them very little. And then when I went out, I said, oh, she might be coming. I went out to the hallway and I came back with this marionette that was dressed and she was old and she had white, black braids with a hat, an Andean hat. And the kids looked at me like, you dirty rat. They were laughing and I said, okay. Aquí está Esperanza, here is Esperanza. And they started to ask questions. And she would answer, but she would say things like, ¿Cómo? ¿Qué? What? Huh? Because she's old. And I said, you have to speak up. And so the kids would ask it louder. And then it became just so much fun. The kids were asking her how many kids she had. And then she would say, bueno, uno, dos, tres. And then they thought it was over. But then they'd pause and she'd go, cuatro, sing. And they would be laughing. And how many sons, how many daughters. And then she was like, oh, no, like I forgot about that one, And then when I thought it was over, because you want to leave them wanting more, she would just fall asleep. I said, she's tired. Thank you very much. And that's it. So we could, so Esperanza came from the actual carving. But there are times when I carved Jane Goodall, but I went with the intention of I need to make a Jane Goodall puppet. And many times that's the way it really is. It's the idea that I need this puppet because I'm going to tell this story. So now I got to create it. Used to tell a story about a sea turtle. It's called Milagro, a miracle. And that sea turtle, you know all the difficulties, the challenges of a sea turtle now with the water and dangers, and we're losing them, and the eggs and all of this kind of stuff. So I created a huge sea turtle, and I had him groaning. And then when you turn him over, you can open up his stomach and you could see all the sea debris that's inside. So the kids got to see it. And what I love about puppets that are animals is that it's the one way of bringing that animal to life next to a child. So we can't bring a sea turtle in and have everybody touch it and talk to it, but you can bring a big, huge puppet in and have him have a personality. Why is he called Milagro? She's called Milagro because 1 out of every 100 sea turtles actually survives to adulthood. So it's a miracle. So we can tell little stories like that. My work at on the North Fork has been, my first entry really was with a camp called Turtleback Farm. that's run by Jennifer Murray. She is a naturalist, birder. I don't know. She specializes in everything. She has these camps. And so sometimes she's looking for, they're learning about owls. So I'll make an owl and then we'll do a craft or something along those lines. But she was doing something with butterflies and had me I didn't know anything about monarchs, except that they're orange, when they come out and whatever. And in doing any kind of puppet to do a presentation, you have to do research. So I researched monarch butterflies and found that the monarch butterflies that we see here on the North Fork, in Greenport, all travel. The migrant, which is the last group, the migrant monarch, which I never knew of before this, they travel all the way to Mexico. And they travel all the way to a place in the mountains of Mexico City, which is called Michoacan. I found this so fascinating that I bought a ticket and I went to Michoacan. I needed to see those monarchs. And you have to actually go up quite a long ways to a sanctuary where they have them. And it was like a spiritual, amazing experience because they arrive right around the time of the Day of the Dead, which is celebrated in Mexico for the spirits of their departed to come back to visit. So these monarch butterflies are coming back. So it brought the two worlds of mine to life, the language, cultural, and this idea of what we see as part of our life around here with seeing monarchs. So I did a little story, and we make big butterfly puppets now, and we tell the story of the butterfly Mari, the La Monarca, the butterfly that flies all the way to where she doesn't want to go, to Mexico, because no one wants to leave home. So we talk about, well, why would you want to leave home? And it's a great introduction to why people leave their homeland and the challenges, which you can understand as a child leaving, but not as necessarily what kind of challenges do animals have when they migrate. And all of those kind of questions, the weather, how long does it take, how many die, what can we do to help? It's all of that, but it's a way of educating through puppetry, through storytelling. And I get the benefit because I get to learn all about this stuff, and I get to see the kids' faces when they're making butterfly puppets from socks.
And have you seen more educators embrace puppetry as a tool?
More than I used to. So I recently went to Aquabox School. I did a 2-day workshop there where all the first graders got to make sock puppets with me. I told a little story. I used like a cranky theater, which is like a panoramic theater. And then we make the puppets. And the teachers, one in particular, she already had like an array and was quick to put the puppet right on her hand and direct the kids. And I loved it because I thought, yes, yeah, you're already there. They're there already. It was a great equalizer, by the way. The sock puppets, if you have X amount of toys, I grew up always wanting a Barbie. But if we're in the classroom and we get the same toy, now it's the great equalizer. Everyone has the same tool, which I think, by the way, a puppet in the classroom is a tool. It's like a book. It's like pencils. Yes. So I do see more, but unfortunately, I think that it still needs to be part of teacher training. I really do. I think teachers need to sometimes say it's okay to be silly, tell a story using a puppet, And for public schools, a lot of times it's financial. How do I get 100 puppets for all my kids that I see? Sock puppets is one way to do it. But it's just, a textbook costs $80 a textbook. A sock puppet, with $80, I can make quite a few sock puppets. So this is an alternative that teachers need to be more aware of.
Yes. No, I think because I think I don't know if people would look at it more as oh, it's too much entertainment, but actually it's a really good educational tool and can get children interacting more and maybe even possibly learn the language quicker than through just a textbook or
Excellent.
other paper related assignments or
Right. Well, when you talk about the tools in a classroom, a crayon is a tool, paper is a tool, your smartboard's a tool, the Chromebook is a tool. It's not one, not the others. It's one and the others. And I think the puppet is really kind of missing on that whole shelf. It's and it's a pretty cheap one to have.
yes.
And it is the equalizer. It's also an inspiration. It's like creating a little theater in your classroom, singing. It incorporates so many of what you do in your classroom anyway, at any level, Because I've used it with seniors. In Cold Spring Harbor, my seniors put on a production of Carmen the opera to children, younger kids. But that's it's a way of social emotional learning. When you're not feeling well, you can have that puppet not feel well. There's so many things there that the arts generally provide. It's like a sad music, a happy song. And the arts are critical in our classrooms. And unfortunately, usually those are the ones that are seen as the extra.
And they get cut first.
That's
or
right.
lose funding. Yeah.
Right. And here it gives us I'm always looking for a good story to tell a story. So there's a lot of great immigration stories through stories that are being written about now with different characters that are animals, and we could make therefore puppets. But it's the same thing.
And also, I was curious when, in terms of the North Fork, what brought you out this way, and what was your first impression of the North Fork when you first came out?
I probably came out early 2000s when my mother-in-law bought a home in Mattatuck. And before that, to me, it was just a place to get to Greenport to take the ferry someplace. Because way, way back, you were too young, but way, way back, it was like a sleepy town. You just went through, there was a vineyard maybe here and there, but very, very few. And it was just Shelter Island. That's where you wanted to go. You wanted to go here. You wanted to go, whatever. But it was just straight to Greenport. There was nothing really to see in between. Then I rediscovered it through my mother-in-law, where she was near the water and the cute beaches. And my husband happens to be an avid, and I can't stress that word enough, gardener. He is in love with everything about the North Fork. But a lot of the homegrown things, the kind of going back to less processed everything, that's also what gets me is this reverence to animals and community. It's much more of a community than I've ever been in, because you can actually have a community event where you go and your interests are what makes you. It's not that you're all living here. It's like your interest brings you together. So I find that, and I see Latinos, which in West Islip I still don't see them, or around there. I don't see as many. Here I see people. I could talk to people. I walk into any store, and if I see that person is Latino, they'll talk to me in Spanish before I even say anything, and I feel very comfortable with that. And it's something that is welcomed, and puppetry has been very welcomed on the North Fork, in particular. And I feel like, yes, finally, I have done performances and workshops at almost every library around here. They give me inspiration. I have one coming up here at Floyd Memorial, and I believe Nina told me her theme is color my world, or is color our world, or something like that. And I'm like, good, let me think of something. And it's like an inspiration And then you get all these groups of kids. And from that point, I've done some workshops at Veme. I'm now going to be working, and I did work a little bit with the North Fork Community Theater.
Yes.
And I mean, we performed on stage with puppets. This place wants it. They are open to, yes, tell us animal stories. Yes, tell us how to make a puppet. Yes, so is what I see in the vineyards, all the beauty, all the nature, the animal, all of that is something that is very inviting for my husband and myself. But him, it's just all about, we're constantly looking at all the trees, the plants, and he's not a super talkative person, but he manages to talk quite a bit to anyone that's planting anything. So it's great.
And then also just looking over your career as an educator over 30 years, what keeps you passionate about teaching and storytelling today?
I have a website that I started quite a while ago, and it was just a blog for myself. And it's called Puppeted. And I started putting in things, because I present at a lot of workshops for teachers as well on how to use puppetry in the classroom. And so I wanted that as my little, okay, I can go back to that, and people can look to see how to make a sock puppet or how to make different types of puppets. Because I've gone to Italy to make giant, processional puppets and little tiny puppets and finger puppets, and what's cheaper to use so that people aren't spending too much from their own pocket. But there's a need. There's a need. And I do have a little bit of a sliding scale when I offer workshops. Some I just do for free because that school needs it. They need it. And others I could charge them a little bit more, but that'll pay for the next school, So as long as they keep my materials, okay, I'm good. And I look for good stories. So sometimes I make a puppet just for the heck of it. I have done consignments where I've made people puppets and things like that. I've sold puppets, different stores in Brooklyn and whatever. But I think the biggest joy is when you're making just puppets with kids. And so to keep that joy going, all I have to do is sometimes I carry a puppet like I did today, my little Senor Fox puppet. They're always fun. I mean, even if it's a little finger puppet I carry with me. I'm going to be performing at the Peconic Makers Fair, and I'll be doing a Cranky, but it's not about just performing. I don't see myself as so much of a performer, but each kid who comes to watch it will be given a little chick to interact with me, to make it a little bit more memorable. And then for them to see that it's made with just nothing. It's made with a piece of faux fur and nothing. And their whole imagination will be. So those little eyes of them looking at their puppet, that's what keeps me going. There cannot be anything greater than seeing a kid with a puppet, making him talk or talking to him.
Yes, and I think it's a nice way even just to, not to be with the technology. I think it's nice to see children interact without technology sometimes, and just more creativity, I think, with their mind and stimulation.
Yeah. I mean, they might want to record it and put it up.
They might want to,
on a TikTok. But quite frankly, it starts with just that, and it's amazing. The people at Aquabog told me that, because one day I did one group, and they said the kids went home. The next day they came in with their puppets again because they were ready to continue talking and playing. And again, it's the great equalizer. They all had the same thing: how cheap it is to make a sock puppet, and how far it can go.
Yes.
And that over the stimulation that I see at restaurants where kids are just plugged into their parents' iPhones to keep them quiet. You have no idea how much I want to take out a puppet. And I've done that, but not so much as at restaurants, on trains and other places. Yes.
Yes. No, and then also, I usually like to ask people, what would you hope for the future of the North Fork and its community down the line?
I think it's really, I'd like to say optimistically, it's heading that way. I think the North Fork Community Center has been a huge thumbprint on where it's going. The idea of the arts and a place for community to come and experience, whether it's a gallery or different workshops, right? What we're hoping to, offer. Look at your library. I mean, it's not just any library. It's doing podcasts of the community that I think is so wonderful and unique. There are things that happen here that just don't happen anywhere else. And I see it as like a little like the plant starting to, like flowers starting to bloom. It's just, and there's enough of care, I think, I've seen with the community where they're making sure there's not going to be too much rain or too much sun. So we got to make sure that, yes, we like tourists, but we don't want them fill in the blank. There is that. And that concern, I think, is legit. There's a reasonableness in that. But I'm happy to see when there's a little bookstore, when there's an art store that have, with them and a couple of the other places that I've seen, I'm like, this is nice. And it's balanced. I think there's still going to be some balancing. I see restaurants come and go. I see, I am, concerned somewhat about which way immigration is going to go around here. Because I think that we here have a nice mix and I think are very respectful of the immigrants, the people that have come and made this place their home.
Yes.
So I feel that, and that's what's been very good for me as well. So I hope to see that continue. But, even in the winter, I love it in the winter. It's I know that's when you don't have the tourists, but I love the vineyards and the jazz and the quiet. And everyone says the same thing. The quiet is nice.
Yes.
And it's ours then, as opposed to always sharing it, as I sometimes feel like in the summer, you're like, okay, all right, okay. But definitely still changing, and I think it will be forever changing.
And I usually just ask at the end if there was anything else you'd like to say or discuss that we haven't talked about.
I can't think, I probably will later, but I can't think of anything other than, I welcome anybody who is interested in puppetry, in whether it's for a workshop or how to learn, to check out Puppet Ed, or I would love to be a part of it and see it still grow. I mean, it should be for everybody. So hopefully there'll be a little bit more opportunities, trying to create some events. And I think that there was like was it in the summer, they have the Monday night, is it still Monday night, where they have the bandstand at near the carousel?
Yes, I think so.
That type of community, when I see all of those people there, I always think, this is a great place for a puppet show. So hopefully I'll see more of those kind of things in the future. But other than that, I couldn't be happier. And again, I'm impressed with everything. I feel like a very natural place to be and to just relax.
Yes. No, definitely. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast and share your story and really your passion for language and education. It really was wonderful to talk with you today, and it was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much. I couldn't be more thrilled to be here.
Thank you.
Senor Fox thinks the same thing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 114 with Carmen Campos. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.